And then there were two. The starting quarterback derby for the BYU football program is down to two contenders, but I think we're all very aware of where it's headed.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on today's show, we're talking about the latest news out of BYU training camp. That is that the QB Derby has been paired from 3 to 2, but does it really feel like it's a one-man race right now? We'll dig into that. Then we'll talk about the implications of the decision that Aaron Roderick, Kalani Sitake have to make at that position and the ramifications you're going to have for this season and on down the road a little bit. And we'll finish up today's show with some stats that say that BYU might be the most underrated team ever when it comes to the AP Top 25 poll, at least in recent memory. All of this brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances today and do it with Monarch Money. Go to monarchmoney.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege and save yourself 50% off your first year. All right, if you missed the news yesterday, if you've been hiding under a rock, it'd be hard to feel like you missed it if you're a BYU fan. But Aaron Roderick spoke to the media yesterday, and he said Saturday after BYU's initial scrimmage of training camp that they were going to make a decision, as he said, quote, soon, unquote, about splitting up the reps differently. They'd been going 33%, essentially, 1/3 for all three of the contenders in the QB battle. Well, we got out to practice on Tuesday morning, and I was there. It was very clear that Bear Bachmeier and McCae Hillstead were the 1-2 guys in terms of the 1-2 combo at quarterback. We saw Trayson Bourget working exclusively with the threes or the reserves in drills and the team drills that we were able to watch. And then Aaron Roderick, after practice, had this to say about how things are looking in the QB race.
First team QB reps today?
Bear took the majority today, and McCae got some as well. As I mentioned Saturday, we can't keep going equal reps with three guys anymore. So, each day you're going to see right now McCae and Bear getting the majority of the reps with the ones and the twos, and that's where we're at right now.
Thank you to BYU Football for that video there. I was unable to shoot it because I had some other obligations going on at the same time. But the point remains that it is a 1-2 combo now with Bear Bachmeier and McCae Hillstead in the race to be BYU starting quarterback. But beyond that, if Bear Bachmeier is in this race as in the thick of it as he is right now, this late on into camp, because for all intents and purposes, everybody, I don't mean to break any news to you guys, but training camp for the BYU football program, it ends essentially this week. They may spread into maybe Monday is the very, very last day. Speaking of next Monday, might be the day that they formally close camp, and then they transition over into game week mode. But this is the last week of training camp. And unless McCae Hillstead is capable of really pulling away in the last 3 or 4 practices here leading up to BYU's final scrimmage of training camp coming up on Saturday, it seems clear to me that Bear Bachmeier has the inside track at being BYU starting quarterback, and thereby would make BYU football history as the first true freshman quarterback to start for BYU in the first game of a season. There have been other quarterbacks, among them guys like Zach Wilson, etc., who have started as freshmen for the BYU football program. That's not groundbreaking. It's that Portland State, the season for the BYU football program, could be headlined by an 18-year-old first-time starting quarterback at the Power 4 level, and that would be absolutely incredible. But the reason I say that is you don't discount what Bear Bachmeier has done. He has gone toe-to-toe with two quarterbacks who have years, I'm talking multiple years of experience on him, A, at the FBS level, and B, at BYU in particular. And this is a kid who came in this past May and has gone toe-to-toe with these guys. Everything screams to me, and I could look foolish a week from now for saying this, but everything looks like, to my vantage, from my vantage point, I guess I should say, that Bear Bachmeier, he will be BYU starting quarterback for the 2025 football season. Does he hold that quarterback starting position all through the season? That remains to be determined. Injury, ineffective play, a myriad of different things could necessitate a change, but it seems like to me at this juncture, so recording this show on August 13th, 2025, I am predicting that Bear Bachmeier, the guy who wears the number 47 as a quarterback, looks like he will be the starting quarterback for BYU when they take the field against Portland State. Now, that may be absolutely heartbreaking to some of you, may be absolutely thrilling to others, but the old adage in college football is if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. But beyond that, the old adage is if you have two quarterbacks or two players of any variety who are essentially equal, well, tie goes to the younger player. The longevity aspect, obviously, with having extra years to work with that player in college football, that is what you usually go with. If the tie is there, you feel like these two players are neck and neck with one another, you give the advantage to the younger player and play them because, like I said, you have a built-in longevity there where they have extra time to work within this system. And the upside for Bear Bachmeier, it's undeniable. There's just simply no way that you can discount what this young man has been capable of doing. I put it on social media yesterday. I'm going to throw it up right now. There was a pair of back-to-back throws from BYU practice yesterday that I watched with my very own eyes, one of which was a rollout from Bear Bachmeier where he was a touch late on releasing the throw, and I got people arguing with me saying that he was saving a hospital ball for JoJo Phillips on this play, but I watched with my very own eyes that he was a touch late on getting the ball out. It was still complete to JoJo Phillips, albeit a little bit behind him. And obviously that is chalked up to a guy who may be thinking just a little bit too much or analyzing / processing a touch slow. And then the very next play, I thought had the throw of training camp from my vantage point for himself when he had an inch perfect pass he put right on the hands of Carson Ryan, who had Ephraim Asiata draped all over him in coverage. He put only where Carson Ryan could haul it in. Ryan, as he's been all training camp long, Mr. Ultra reliable at tight end, hauls it in for a nice game. That shows you exactly what the Bear Bachmeier experience might be at BYU. Yes, it's full of inexperience. Yes, he is very young at 18 years old. Yes, he has got undeniable talent, an arm that can really make every throw that BYU requires of him. He's got very good athleticism. He's a well put together athlete at 6'2", 225 pounds. And beyond that, he has got incredible upside. There's a reason why programs across this country, we're talking the Notre Dames of the world, the Alabamas, we're talking the who's who of college football, wanted this young man to commit to their program. He ultimately picked Stanford because his brother, Tiger, who is now at BYU with him, was there at the time. He believed in what Troy Taylor was building. Well, Troy Taylor summarily gets dismissed from his position during the middle of training camp for the Stanford Cardinal. Stanford's loss is BYU's gain, and it sure looks like the Bear Bachmeier era is going to start a lot sooner you might have anticipated, but it does not mean it's a bad thing. It actually indicates that this is a young man who has got everything within him and showing why so many programs are so high on this 4-star prospect out of Vista Murrieta, California, and wanted him in their programs. BYU found a guy that may make history for the BYU football program as the first true freshman to start a season opener for the BYU football program. And let's also acknowledge a spade for a spade. This schedule, the early part of the schedule, it's tailor-made for breaking in a young quarterback. Portland State, one of the worst defensive teams at the FCS level a year ago. Stanford's in full rebuild mode with an interim coach that comes to BYU the week after that. And then you travel across the country to face off against East Carolina before kicking off Big 12 play. That feels like a pretty soft landing in terms of the overall impact that the schedule could have, or at least maybe the best schedule you could maybe plan for, to insert a first-time 18-year-old freshman quarterback to play if you're going to start him right out the chute. We'll see how it all goes. And like I said, I may look foolish 2 days from now, 2 minutes from now, or 2 weeks from now if McCae Hillstead makes up that ground. But it sure looks like from my vantage point right now that Bear Bachmeier, he is the guy for the BYU football program. All right, coming up next, what are the implications of said decision for the BYU football program? Because let's be honest, quarterback recruiting, it is an absolute trial by fire anymore with the transfer portal and everything else involved in the collegiate sports space these days. What could a decision like Bear Bachmeier being BYU starting quarterback mean for the Cougars this fall? But beyond that, looking ahead down the line, well, there's some pretty important implications, and we'll get to those next right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Now, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth. It's a 401k, properties, investments of all varieties. And they don't have the full picture. You can end up with leaving money on the table because you don't simply put say on top of it all. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or even on your phone. All of us seem to be attached to our phones, tethered to them, it feels like, quite literally at times. And Monarch Money will do the heavy lifting for you. Link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally actually feel like you're in control of your money instead of vice versa without ever touching one of those spreadsheets that you probably have zero interest in actually getting to. The best part is it makes it simple to review your finances with your partner. A lot of us have a significant other where you can stay on the same page and make sure you guys are obviously making sure that your money is where you want it to be, if not growing and helping you guys build for your future. So don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com using the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing well out there, including the troll that hopped in my DMs earlier this week. This is the first time I've revealed this. I have my DMs on social media, on Twitter in particular, are wide open. If you want to send me a note, totally cool for it. And to the troll that sent me a note and said, "Hey, Jake, go back to your mom's basement and keep recording your podcast," got some bad news for you. A, it's not my mom's basement. I do, in fact, have a mortgage and own this house. And yes, I do, in fact, work in a basement in a closet. So there you go, Mr. Troll. But thanks all the same for your support of the podcast. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review, share it with your family and friends, and be with us every single day. I'm not going to lie. I do like to have some fun on social media, and that one I did have some fun with. All right, let's talk about the implications of BYU's quarterback decision here, because regardless of who they go with, and heck, I can't even discount that Trayson Bourget maybe gets back into the QB race down the line here in the final stanza of training camp. But the bigger point is, whoever BYU goes with has implications for the future of the quarterback position for BYU. They have this guy by the name of Ryder Lyons. Heck, you may have heard of him. He's a 5-star talent that just recently committed to BYU out of Folsom High School. And he is going to go on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and intends to serve 1 year of said mission before enrolling at BYU in 2027. So whoever is BYU starting quarterback in 2025, with any of these three, because they all have multiple years of eligibility remaining, we're going to be in line to be a starting quarterback for at least 2 seasons, it feels like, barring something unforeseen, injury or the like. But the situation is that if and when, it's actually more like when, Ryder Lyons shows up on campus, there is going to be an undue amount of pressure to have BYU put him into that quarterback spot and see what he's capable of, because once again, he's a 5-star talent. He's quite literally a guy that BYU's not had for 20 some odd years. When was the last time they had a 5-star prospect? Was that Ofa Mohetau? It may have been. I know Ben Olsen was. Jake Heaps. Well, Jake Heaps was a 4-star, but the point remains. It's been a minute since BYU's had an elite quarterback, if not the top end type talent that Ryder Lyons has in him. Will he take some time to come home off of a mission and get up to speed in terms of getting the mission rust off of himself and getting himself back into shape to play games? Maybe so. And that would time out if you were to go, as we just talked about with Bear Bachmeier, where Bear would have essentially 3 seasons for BYU. And if he shines, because he's 18 years old, and if he can play at this level already as an 18-year-old, he could easily be a 3-and-done guy and jump to the NFL at that point. Because you'd think, okay, 3 years of starting experience seems pretty natural to make the jump. I just look at this, and whoever, Bear Bachmeier, McCae Hillstead, Trayson Bourget, any of them, whoever ends up as BYU starting quarterback, whenever they wrap up their careers, in the case of McCae Hillstead, he's got 3 years of eligibility remaining, much like Bear Bachmeier has 4. I think Trayson has 2. He's a redshirt junior, if I'm doing my math right. The point is, there is going to be implications because you also have guys like Enoch Watson coming home off of a mission, and BYU is extremely high on that young man's potential coming out of the Arizona prep ranks. Emerson Guileman, well, he's going to go away for 2 years, and when he returns in 2028-ish, he's going to expect to enter the fray. Whoever ends up as BYU starting quarterback this season has the opportunity to be a starting quarterback for multiple years, but then the competition just gets absolutely ramped up to an incredible level. And I will also add this. You can never discount the fact that guys, they get jumpy when it comes to not having an opportunity to play at the level that they want to play at, or at least the playing time they're looking for. The transfer portal always exists out there, and BYU could see a guy or two decide to transfer after the season. Let's say it is Bear Bachmeier, who's BYU starting quarterback. Well, if McCae Hillstead or Trayson Bourget just don't see a route to playing time, why wouldn't they hit the portal once again and try and find a landing spot for themselves? And then BYU is essentially back in the spot where they found themselves a couple of times in the past couple of seasons, where you're relying on the transfer portal to bolster your ranks at quarterback. It is an absolutely critical thing that I know that you want to look at the here and now and be where your feet are, to use that expression, and focus on Portland State and the 2025 football season. But you do have to have a macro view at some point when it comes to Kalani Sitake and Aaron Roderick's decision as to who the starting quarterback is going to be. For all intents and purposes, once again, from where I sit and watching this play out, if Bear Bachmeier is indeed the choice, it feels like you are setting him up to have maybe a 2-3 year run and then say, best of luck to you. And we'll see if he decides to come back for a senior year and you battle it out at that point with a Ryder Lyons. To the victor go the spoils. And you could see a guy like Ryder Lyons supplant him as a starting quarterback at BYU. But the near-term future for the quarterback position for BYU, while it may look a little dicey in 2026, depending on how the transfer portal cycle plays out, beyond that, though, there's a lot of talented quarterbacks that are coming into this BYU football program, and they all are going to want playing time, and it's going to make for some epic QB battles in years to come. And I, for one, cannot wait to see it play out. But at the same time, it is an interesting thing that Aaron Roderick, Kalani Sitake, and the rest of the crew, when it comes to that decision as to who the starting quarterback at BYU is going to be, you got to weigh all of it. And I don't envy that. That's why they are paid the big bucks. That's why I'm a podcaster, literally sitting in a studio talking about this. But all the same, it's an important thing. And beyond that, I should also add this, is that the track record of success who you have at quarterback yields results on the recruiting trail as well. If a guy like Bear Bachmeier proves to be the guy that BYU at least thinks he can be as a quarterback, who's to say that's not going to lead other quarterbacks, whether they're guys from Utah or beyond, top shelf quarterback talent is going to look at BYU and say, hey, they're developing guys at a pretty incredible rate. They got Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall into the NFL. They're probably going to put Bear Bachmeier into the NFL if all goes well here. They got Ryder Lyons that committed to this football program. There'll be certain guys who are scared away by the quality of quarterbacks BYU has in the pipeline. There's other guys who will embrace the challenge and say, hey, I want to be coached up by guys like Matt Mitchell and or Aaron Roderick. I want to be a part of the BYU football program. And they won't shy away from competing to be a starting quarterback at Brigham Young University, because it's got a moniker of QBU, and there's other quarterback universities like it, but BYU's pantheon over the past 50 plus years, some pretty incredible quarterbacks have come through this. And Aaron Roderick, he's got to be right up there among some of the coaches who can take a lot of credit for reestablishing what BYU's quarterback tradition has been over the past 5 or 6 years. Yes, I know there's some of you out there who think he's an abject failure and you don't think he has any business being BYU's offensive coordinator. Set that to the side and understand this is a guy who has absolutely developed some elite talent at BYU. I don't care if you think that Kalani Sitake got Zach Wilson or Jaron Hall was already going to be a BYU guy. Well, they weren't a finished product when they showed up at BYU. And a lot of that credit goes to Matt Mitchell and Aaron Roderick for developing those guys into who they became. And then also looking at what the future here with Bear Bachmeier, Enoch Watson, Emerson Geilman, or heck, even Ryder Lyons, future looks very, very bright at the quarterback position for BYU. And it's all kind of wrapped up in one as something you've got to consider when it comes to your decision for BYU's starting quarterback position, both now and on down the line into the future. All right, coming up, we'll finish up today's show talking a little bit about what's going on with BYU and the AP poll. They're not in the preseason top 25, but they're one spot out. I think it's an advantageous spot to be, but history tells us that BYU, they are the best team in terms of being underrated. Okay, I should retract that. They are the most underrated team, at least in the recent past, when it comes to the AP poll, and the stats back it up. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not signed up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, I would encourage you guys to do so. I'm passing along my notes about what I'm observing at BYU football practice, and they're going out to our Insider Group members minutes after practice ends. It's all my unique insight. It's stuff that I don't share literally anywhere else, not even on this podcast. Some of the stuff that's in those notes. And if you want the inside scoop on all things BYU sports that I'm hearing every single day coming to your phone in the form of a text message, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's $5 a month to be a part of the group. But beyond that, you get a 14-day free trial to be a part of the group. And you can get yourself essentially to game week at this point ahead of Portland State with all the inside intel I can muster. And it's all part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Click the link in the show notes below or reach out to us and we'll get you squared away. All right, before we go on today's show, let's talk about something interesting when it comes to the AP poll. Now, I got to give credit to Brett McMurphy from On3 Sports, but more importantly, a resident BYU fan who is far more brilliant than I am at looking at trends, statistics, and the like, and that's Jeff Fuller. Now, Jeff has done some really, really cool research that indicates that AP poll voters have routinely underrated BYU, at least in the recent past, when it comes to their finishes in the AP poll relative to where they start, whether it's in or outside the AP top 25 preseason poll. As he notes, and you can go to this, it's substack.com. Jeff has got a Substack. Just follow him at JJFuller72 on Twitter. I'm going to do my best to get him on the podcast. Actually, I probably should have done to talk about this. But the bigger point is if you look at history, and Jeff's done the research here, is that BYU is the number one most underrated team when it comes to the AP poll. As he points out, 50-year history, total places higher or lower than expected. BYU outclasses everybody with 142 times where they finished higher in the rankings versus than they were expected to. The next closest, the vaunted Boise State Broncos. 25 years, Boise State takes the lead there, but BYU is second in that regard. Past 5 years, BYU once again outclasses Boise State 42-22 in terms of those places, higher or lower relative to their expectation. BYU is perennially underrated, and I get why the voters this year left BYU just right on the doorstep of the AP top 25. You lose your starting quarterback, just from a 30,000-foot view for a lot of these voters, they're going to knock BYU down a peg or three. But the thing is, BYU's in a very advantageous position. Remember, last year, they were way off the radar. They were 5-17. Missed out on a bowl game. Were picked to finish 14th in the new look 16-team Big 12. And them and Arizona State came flying out of nowhere to rise up the national polls. The BYU top out, were they 6 at one point, if I recall correctly, in the college football playoff rankings? That may be a touch high, but the point remains. BYU went from way off the radar to near top of the rankings. They were in the top 10 nationally. Well, BYU starts this year unofficially is number 26 in the country in the AP poll. You win a couple of games right out of the chute, even if it is Portland State and Stanford, you're 2-0. Teams at the back half of the top 25 lose games, and suddenly you find yourself inside the top 25, and all you got to do from there, keep winning, keep climbing, and live your dream as one of the teams that, once again, did much better than anticipated when it comes to the AP poll. I will also add this, and Jeff retweeted this, comes from our good friend Cougar Stats. And the thing is with Cougar Stats, they have pointed out that BYU's AP preseason ranking after being ranked the previous season, they have never checked in ranked higher. Speaking of the preseason poll, the year after they finished the season. So look at 1984, obviously finished number 1, winning that national title. The next season's preseason ranked 10th there. The next season final ranked 16. They have gone every year. They've always finished high and then fallen down in those rankings. I think he points out there's 6 or 7 times they have. So let's see. Jeff Fuller, according to this, all 10 of the times BYU's finished top 15 in the AP poll, they have never been ranked higher in the following year's AP poll than their prior year's finish, including being unranked in 6 of those 10 instances and only inside the top 15 once at number 10 preseason in 1985. Pretty interesting intel that BYU, relative to expectations, is going to exceed them. I think BYU's in an advantageous spot, as I said, sitting on the doorstep of the top 25. You don't need to be inside the top 25 to live your dream of playing in the college football playoff. Arizona State proved that last year by winning the Big 12 and obviously come in within a pretty awful targeting call of knocking off what is now preseason number 1 Texas. But the point is, this is a BYU football program that has everything to play for. And Connor Pay said it yesterday on the podcast. For those of you who are everydayers here on the Locked On Podcast Network, he pointed out that the chip on BYU's shoulder, it should be sizable. They should think, hey, we finished 13th last year, and you think we're going to drop outside the top 25? Great. We're going to go out there and prove ourselves once again. A lot of the guys that had that proverbial chip on their shoulder last year when BYU was just so laughable. I will never forget BYU with a 8 or 9-0 at the time, traveling to UCF, a sub 500 UCF night squad, and for some reason, a nationally ranked undefeated BYU football team, according to the odds makers at FanDuel and others, was an underdog to the UCF Knights. That was so laughable. And if I was a guy who was inclined to bet, and sports betting, it's not my jam. I also live in a state where, it's kind of not kosher, but the point remains. If I were a betting man, you should have hammered that line that BYU was an underdog against UCF, because in talking and the feeling around the BYU football program that week in particular last year, you could tell that they were irate, saying, wow, we are just absolutely getting disrespected. I think they carried that chip all the way through that bowl game down there in San Antonio, when all the talking points were all about Colorado. Even during the game, I was there in the Alamo Dome watching that game play out. And I can tell you, just watching with my own eyes and the sense I got from the BYU football program, they took all the chatter about Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, the Heisman Trophy, Coach Prime, everything about Colorado seemed to be, it was one-sided. It was truly one-sided in the lead up to that game. And to quote Mike Tyson, I took it personal. And I think BYU collectively, they took it personal, and they just laid a can of open a can of on Colorado. That's what I hope BYU understands about this season, is they are in a better spot than they were a year ago, but they still have plenty to prove. Yes, they may have a 18-year-old starting quarterback, a true freshman quarterback starting for them at quarterback, but the other guys around those players, a lot of them are seasoned veterans that went through the wars of the 5-7 in 2023, and then the highs of the 11-2 and the oh so close. We have heard from so many coaches, and you're going to hear it throughout the rest of training camp, that BYU wants to go from what they're calling good to great. That's the quote I think that's going to dominate for BYU this season if they pull it off. That good to great is what BYU is trying to do in 2025. And I hope they pull it off. And I hope, once again, that what Jeff Fuller, Cougar Stats, I know that on 3, Brett McMurphy, BYU is the number one most underrated team in the AP poll, I think the last 20 years or something like that. They need to go out there and show once again that the national pollsters might want to put some respect on BYU's name, because history suggests that BYU routinely has been outperforming those expectations, and probably deserves a little extra love when it comes to the national polls, at least in the preseason. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. As always, thank you for all of your support. I promised you guys earlier this week I was going to get to a conversation with John Talmoya-Payao. That is still coming. Austin Leusa I've also talked to. And yesterday, I also had a chat with Kelly Papinga, obviously the edges coach for BYU and special teams coordinator. Had a great one-on-one chat with him as well. So those are all coming up later this week or early next week here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. But if you want the best coverage of BYU training camp, where else would you want to go? We're here for you guys literally every single day. So please subscribe, rate, review, share with your family and friends, and heck, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group and continue to support what I am doing with this podcast. It's a labor of love. I am absolutely having the time of my life, and thank you for being along for the ride with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. And as I like to say to sign off every single day, make sure you check out the Portal podcast, by the way, if you want the latest when it comes to all things college football, whatever's happening, transfer portal, recruiting, what the future of the sport looks like in general. Brian and the guys over at the Portal podcast, they've got you covered. Make that your second listen coming up right after this one. But as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen today. And until tomorrow, everybody, thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.